Today, we're diving straight into the fascinating science and the intricate sensory architecture behind Pinot Noir. We're basing this entire deep dive on a masterclass led by sensory scientist and wine tasting coach, Dr. Isabelle Lesschaeve. So, if you've ever wondered why one glass of Pinot tastes like fresh strawberries while another literally tastes like a damp forest floor, well, you're in the right place. We're going to break down the exact chemical and physical variables that build those experiences. I really love how logically structured this class is. Here is our roadmap for today, following Dr. Lesschaeve's exact journey. We'll look at the grape's unique biological challenges, decode its specific aromas, explore its texture and mouthfeel, examine external variables like climate and craft, and finally, we'll talk about how you can actually train your own palate. All right, part 1, the heartbreaking grape. Vulnerable vines with a complex payoff. To truly understand Pinot Noir, we literally have to start in the dirt of the vineyard. As Dr. Lesschaeve points out, among winemakers, Pinot Noir has this notorious reputation as the heartbreaking grape. And the reason is pretty simple. It is incredibly vulnerable. It has a very early bud break, which leaves the vines super susceptible to spring frosts. On top of that, the berries themselves have exceptionally thin skins. This makes them wide open to diseases like bunch rot. And as we've seen a lot recently, that thin skin means Pinot Noir is heavily impacted by wildfire smoke taint, way more so than your thicker-skinned grape varieties. Which brings us to what we can call the Pinot paradox. Because of those thin skins, the grape has very low levels of anthocyanins. Those are the compounds responsible for color. That's what gives Pinot Noir its deceptive, light ruby, almost translucent look. But here's the catch. Despite that light color, the berries are packed with abundant seed-derived tannins, which provide massive structural backbone. So even though the yields are naturally low and it demands meticulous canopy management from the grower, when a winemaker actually gets it right, the sensory payoff is this massive, incredibly complex aromatic evolution. Moving right along to section 2, decoding Pinot aromas, from fresh red fruits to earthy undergrowth. Now we're shifting from the vineyard directly into your glass. You know, smelling strawberry in your glass isn't just magic, it's pure chemistry. Fermentation produces these chemical compounds called esters, which our brains interpret as fresh red fruits like strawberry, raspberry, or tart cranberry. Meanwhile, compounds that are naturally inherent to the berries themselves, like lanolin and dasmascinone, trigger floral notes like rose or orange blossom. Now, when a winemaker uses oak barrel aging, they introduce completely new compounds. Eugenol gives us that hint of clove, and guaiacol gives us smokiness. And Dr. Lesschaeve makes a really crucial distinction here. Oak smokiness is like a cozy, pleasant wood fire, whereas that wildfire smoke taint we mentioned earlier is harsh, kind of like an ashtray. And finally, of course, we have those famous earthy, mushroomy forest floor notes that really start to emerge as the wine develops. Okay, section 3, texture and mouthfeel. Let's talk about the physical sensations of wine, because Pinot Noir physically interacts with your mouth. Sensory scientists define mouthfeel very specifically. It is not a flavor. It's the physical, tactile sensations you experience in your mouth. We're talking about temperature, the warming irritation from high alcohol content, or, and this is absolutely critical for red wine, the friction created on the mucosa of your mouth by tannins. Let's zoom in on a very specific type of tannin, proanthocyanins. Yeah, it's a huge scientific word, but all you really need to know is that these are tannins derived directly from the grape seeds. When the grapes get crushed, these tannins are released into the juice. They are essential because they build the fundamental structure of the wine and dictate how well it's going to age. And as a sensory experience, these tannins create friction. Depending on how exactly the winemaker manages the extraction of those C tannins, the resulting mouthfeel can swing wildly between two extremes. On one side, if they're perfectly managed, you get this luscious, full, smooth sensation that experts describe as silk or velvet. But on the exact opposite end, if the tannins are harsh, immature, or just over-extracted, you get this highly astringent, drying sensation that literally feels like your tongue is gripping sandpaper. Next up, section 4, climate, craft, and time. The raw grape is just the starting point, so let's look at the external forces that manipulate this sensory profile. First up, geography. There's a stark contrast here. Cool climates, like Burgundy in France, where the prices can sometimes be as high as the acidity, or the Willamette Valley in Oregon, yield wines with lighter colors, high natural acidity, and really bright red fruit and floral notes. Contrast that with warm climates, like inland California or parts of Australia. These produce wines with darker colors, lower acidity, and darker fruits like black cherry or plum. But there's a major risk in warm climates. The sugar accumulates so fast in the heat that the grape might reach the target alcohol level before the actual tannins are fully mature. If it's harvested then, the wine will suffer from undesirable green or bitter flavor notes because it lacks phenolic ripeness. Then there's the winemaker's craft. When those grapes hit the winery, a huge decision has to be made. Do we keep the stems or remove them? Destemming the grapes before fermentation gives you a softer texture that really pushes those primary red fruit esters forward, keeping green notes to a minimum. But opting for whole cluster fermentation, leaving those stems in the mix, adds this perfumey, spicy, herbal complexity. More importantly, the stems add structural tannins that let the wine age gracefully for years. Though again, it comes with a risk of introducing bitter greenness if those stems aren't perfectly ripe. And finally, time changes everything. As we track Pinot Noir over the years, the visual and sensory profile completely transforms. At year 1, you've got a light ruby hue and dominant fresh primary red fruits. But by year 5, something fascinating happens chemically. Those aggressive seed and stem tannins begin to polymerize. Basically, they aggregate and clump together into larger molecules, losing their abrasive edges, so the mouthfeel smooths out dramatically. By year 10 and beyond, slow oxidation shifts the color from ruby to brick or garnet. The fresh fruit fades away, and complex tertiary aromas emerge. We're talking dry fruit, leather, tobacco, and even black truffle. Which brings us to our final section. Train your senses, activating your palate with the Curious Palates framework. We've covered a ton of science, but how do we actually apply this so we aren't just blindly memorizing flavor descriptors? This is where Dr. Lesschaeve's Curious Palates community framework really shines. She uses a brilliant, practical 4-week training method. Week 1 is building the foundation, learning the sensory map we just went through. Week 2 is where it gets fun. You source physical reference products for specific descriptors. So if you want to learn what red fruit esters or earthy notes smell like, you go to the store and buy fruit jams, tea leaves, or dried mushrooms. Week 3 is at-home training, repeatedly smelling and feeling those physical references to literally rewire your brain's sensory pathways. And week 4 is the application, a blind tasting where you evaluate a wine strictly on your perception, without a label biasing your expectations. It's just an incredibly empowering way to learn about wine, stripping away the pretension and focusing entirely on the biology of the grape and your own physical senses. Which leaves us with one vital, provocative question for the next time you pour a glass of Pinot Noir. Are you evaluating that wine based on what you actually sense in the glass? Or are you just tasting what the label or a sommelier told you that you should taste? Try trusting your trained senses next time. You might be surprised by the architecture you discover.